Inga is a senior partner at McKinsey Company, specializing in automotive and industrial strategy. She helps global companies drive performance, transform operations, and navigate disruption with a sharp focus on innovation and execution. And let's give her a really warm welcome.
Thank you for being here, Inga.
It's a real pleasure. So excited.
And thank you guys, all of our friends, for joining us, braving the rain, enjoying some pizza. It's Friday. Let's have some fun. So we have, as Scott just said, we have senior partner at McKinsey here. But you have truly built a career from intern on to get to this place today. Can you give us a little bit of your background just in how you found yourself in this seat today?
Yes, of course. Super happy to. So I grew up in Germany, as you can tell from my accent. It's definitely not American. I joined McKinsey, as you said, as an intern it was honestly a little bit by accident. I was a nanny for this family, and the husband happened to be like a COO somewhere. And I was like, hey, what would I need to do to become like a COO somewhere? And he's like, yeah, you're kind of young. Why don't you think about consulting? It's a great training ground, and you're gonna get to learn about a bunch of industries and a bunch of functions, and it's kind of a good toolkit. And so I was like, oh, that sounds good. Maybe I do that for a couple of years. So I joined McKinsey in our Frankfurt office, and within 3 months ended up in Detroit serving a US automotive company, and realized, I was like, oh, the US is such a fun market. It's more entrepreneurial, it's a little bit less hierarchical, there's more willingness to disrupt and challenge the status quo. And so I ended up doing some more work in the US, went to Sri Lanka, went to Finland, a bunch of really random places, and ultimately ended back up in the US. I tried being a banker for 2 years for Goldman, realized that was not what I wanted to do with my life, and so came back to McKinsey and kind of then felt that I wanted to do something that was really different, that was much more entrepreneurial. And so I looked at what are some of the spaces, kind of McKinsey, it's clearly a pretty old, well-established institution. And so I was like, what are the areas we don't do? And I realized we were serving the car manufacturers, we were serving the kind of tier one suppliers, so all the people who make components that go into the cars, but we weren't actually spending much time with dealers, the software companies that allow you to buy a car online, the digital classifieds, the companies who allow digital auto lending. And so I kind of build that business and build that practice for McKinsey, and it was kind of really fun to have all the benefits of kind of a big institution, but then do something that's been much more entrepreneurial. And so I've built that over the last kind of 10 years, I guess 12 years now. And now I kind of get to help us build what we're doing in Utah. So as a firm, we have opened a Denver office a couple of years ago, and kind of we really are passionate about the Mountain West region. And so I get to kind of start to build our presence here. We now have around 35 to 40 people in the region, and so kind of in Salt Lake, Provo, Lehigh, Park City, and so it's kind of really energizing to think about a different way to kind of grow the next impact area.
Oh yeah, and so McKinsey is just about to hit its 100-year milestone, which obviously as a community that thrives with startups and does have legacy systems around here, a startup can lend so much of that energy, that enthusiasm, that innovation, but what do you think startups can really learn from long-lived legacies like a McKinsey at the early days to help achieve that sustainability long-term?
I think there's something about having a true north for yourself. Like if I think about us as a firm, we're kind of very values driven. Yeah, we start with kind of like our clients come first. We're kind of, our sole focus is to to drive impact at the clients we work with and to develop and retain exceptional talent. And so I think those things have very little to do with introducing AI to an automotive client. Yeah, but I think it's having this kind of broader vision on what you want to do and how do you want to shape impact in the environment you want to operate in. And then kind of a lot of the tactical day-to-day changes, the way we serve clients today is fundamentally different than what we did almost 100 years ago. But I think these core beliefs of helping institutions drive lasting, holistic impact. And so I think thinking about within the business you're starting, what is really kind of this kernel of truth, the kernel of the problem you want to solve, the impact area you want to go after, and then kind of like also having the ambition to continue to a little bit disrupt yourself. When we started to do digital or now AI projects, it fundamentally changes what we expect our employees to do. And so it's like, it's easy when you have the legacy to get a little bit complacent. And I think startups are very good. And I think it's like something we sometimes take also when we look at startups at this self-disruption. But I think it also can't come at the cost of something has to pay the bills. Yeah? So it's kind of clear North Star vision, making sure there's something that creates economic value and pays the bills, but then over time kind of to redisrupt and re-innovate.
Oh, absolutely. And I have a few follow-up questions to that one, but to try and keep us with like a streamline, what was it about Utah specifically that really drew McKinsey's eye as a favorable market to expand into?
So, I mean, I think besides my personal passion of living here, I think as an institution, we believe it's a really diverse community. So from something like very old established mining players to kind of a thriving young startup culture like you guys have really fostered and encouraged with Silicon Slopes. I mean, it's so energizing to see kind of the news releases of the funding rounds and people growing and expanding and creating employment in Utah. But I think one thing we are drawn to is kind of the breadth of businesses. Because of course for us to think about markets, there has to be a group of clients we can serve and organizations we can partner with. And so I think it's the breadth of that combined with kind of a thriving and highly effective government combined with kind of like a private sector across like healthcare, food, mining, industrials, consumer goods. And so I think there is a breadth of sectors and industries. I think the other thing is when you look at the hard economic factors and you look at growth in employment, there is a lot of kind of growth and momentum, and we feel that it's nice to help companies cut costs. It's a lot more fun to help companies to kind of grow and generate impact and employment in that way.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I'm relatively new to Utah in the last 4 years or so, and I can tell even in that time how much the growth here has multiplied, how quickly we are expanding this area. With that in mind, you've talked about a company needing to know what kind of impact they want to shape, right, in an initiative. Is there a specific impact that McKinsey's looking to make for Utah with its unique economy, or is it looking to bring a little bit more of what it's done elsewhere over here for us?
So I think when we do work, we do it kind of in the public and in the private sector. And I think if I think about the public sector, there are some opportunities, and I know the governor is quite passionate around it, around kind of rural development and kind of holistic participation in the growth of Utah. There are some things around poverty, especially kind of at the Wasatch Front. So if you think about kind of broader societal impact, I think those are some topics that we are quite passionate about. I think if I think about the business piece, I think it's really helping companies scale and grow and kind of finding productive ways of integrating AI into that growth. And there is an element of upskilling the workforce and getting the workforce ready to participate. And I think Utah has a very young, very mobile, very open workforce. And so I just think there's a lot of things that play in the favor of also helping new companies come into Utah or scaling the footprint that they have today in the market.
Mm-hmm. And what was it about Utah that drew you here? What was it about that had a sparkle for you?
I mean, I think I grew up hiking, so I love the mountains. I grew up hiking in Switzerland with my parents all my life. A couple of years ago, decided that running marathons wasn't enough, and so I started to do ultra marathons and 100-milers and trail races, and so it's a pretty fabulous way to do that. But I think it's also, I wanted something that kind of, again, was like a new entrepreneurial challenge to kind of do something new and different in a different market. And we have a 3-year-old, and we also wanted her to kind of grow up in an environment that's maybe not quite as focused on what about private school do we compete for, but like a more kind of values-based environment to kind of grow and develop in while being more outside as well.
Oh, yeah. And I know from some of our friendly faces around here that we do have hikers in the room, and that this does have just seemingly an endless supply of beautiful vistas. You are an ultra marathon runner, and that is something I think that's very impressive and very rare. You've mentioned to me that you've seen synergies between what kind of discipline and endurance it takes to do racing like that and what it would take to be an effective business leader. Can you tell us a little bit about the parallels there?
So I think when you start a business, you run a 100-miler, there's problems that come up along the way. And each of these problems would be a perfectly good reason to stop running, whether it's your GI trouble, you get blisters on your toes. Your body really tells you that after 75 miles, you could be done and you could just sit down. It would be perfectly acceptable. And so if you start a company, you're going to realize whatever, your initial customer doesn't scale as well, the willingness to pay for the product isn't what you expected it to be. You have manufacturing issues, there are tariffs, and you have to rebuild your supply chain. And each of them could be easy enough a reason to throw in the towel. But I think ultimately there's kind of a clarity around the destination you want to take the business to, that kind of every time you face one of these roadblocks, you actually take a problem-solving mindset to it. What does it take to solve the problem? And a lot of it is also about having a team around you. Of course, you can run 100 miles by yourself, and I've done this, but the more fun have been where you have a crew and there's a group of people and they pace you at the end and they nudge you to go a bit quicker and maybe not walk, but continue to run. And so I think in the same way, if you think about your team that you bring together when you found the business, it's like a complementary skill set. It's not someone who runs as fast as you, but it's someone who at 2 a.m. in the night, when you really think you want to sit down, gets you moving and swaps the battery on your headlamp. And so I think it's also this momentum of moving forward together and kind of knowing what you are good at and knowing where you're struggling, and then building kind of a team that complements you.
Oh, absolutely. We've talked here before just about the value of that support network and keeping the energy going all the way to the finish line. When you were talking earlier about AI and how obviously businesses are confronted right now with how they're going to be integrating that, are there any key themes that you're seeing across industries that people should be evaluating if their business is not AI, but they're looking to future-proof their business? Or is it an extremely nuanced solution for each person to be at least maintaining right now the pace of AI?
So I think there is kind of, sometimes it's you use a buzzword to kind of drive transformation you wanted to drive anyway in your business. So we see some of our clients in the same way you can use a merger as a catalyst to change some things in your business that you already wanted to change. Some people use AI as kind of just a way to say, maybe we've gotten a bit complacent and old-fashioned in our model, and maybe we should take another fresh look at it. So I think we see some clients who just really take it and say, let me look across each department of my business and say, what is actually kind of my future vision for this? We just did it for a used car auction. You would not think about this as an AI-enabled business. Yeah, there's cars that come off transportations and then they go down an auction lane and then they get sold. But there's huge opportunity on pricing, on how do you optimize the logistics, on how you get the cars to the auction site, on creating dynamic pricing that in real time ingests data from classified websites on what the pricing is at. And so thinking about how do I take different pieces of my business and just kind of fundamentally rethink them. And I think it's a bit this theme I mentioned earlier of being willing to disrupt yourself. It's yes, I have a model that works and that actually creates a great economic return, but it could become more future-proof or generate a stronger economic return if I'm willing to take a fresh look at it. I think the other thing is AI without a human in the loop has proven to not kind of create the best outputs. So thinking about whether it's the code release on your software that you have an AI built for you, or whether it's the customer engagement or the chatbots, like kind of like what is really the quality of the interaction? Because ultimately, especially for startups, a lot of it is around the trust you build with the customer. And like trust is kind of earned very hardly and lost very easily. And so like one or two bad interactions with a terrible code release, like a non-responsive chatbot in your customer service, can be quite detrimental. And so also thinking about who are the customers I want to experiment with, or who are the situation where it's low risk because I have safeguards built in to catch it if the model doesn't do what I think it should be doing.
Oh, yeah. That's very helpful. And we can circle back if anybody has specific questions at the end. But one thing that you've mentioned a few times is self-disruption. And in your roles, you've helped several different types of business leaders achieve courageous pivots, something that's a significant, adjustment to go further and to do better. What have you seen, knowing that a lot of our audience, a lot of our community are going to be those startup founders or those leaders that at some point might have to adjust their initial vision in order for it to truly be proven in the market and valuable? What is the quality in the entrepreneur, the business leader that you've seen? What does it take internally to navigate a shift like that without losing the identity of the business or the team that brought you there?
So I think sometimes, like for one of my clients, they kind of grew business, and it was each locations was very entrepreneurially driven. Yeah, and it worked great when kind of people owned it. They owned a lot of equity. By the time they had 50 locations, it became less great. By the time they now have 1,000 locations, 1,000 individual entrepreneurs make individually optimized decisions, did not generate the best business output. And so it was a really tough challenge for the CEO in that role to say, hey, I was one of these entrepreneurs and I thrived on the energy and the autonomy I had. And so how can I give autonomy in certain decisions, be that local marketing or be that local assortment choices, while centralizing the overall procurement, the price setting, the key account management, so I really get to market with the benefit of 1,000 locations as opposed to like 1,000 individually operating locations. So I think sometimes it's like saying, at the scale I have, let me put myself in my customer's shoes. Yeah, and I see a lot of these pivots are actually driven from a customer need and a market need. I think if you just want to disrupt yourself for the sake of disrupting yourself, it's sometimes less productive. But if you want to disrupt yourself because your customers are changing, and so what was happening in the customer base is the customer base was consolidating, and they wanted this one throat to choke. They didn't want to call 1,000 people, and so in that case, understanding where the customer was and really making it a bit of customer-led disruption. So I think keeping the eye on the customer, I think, is one thing we find is quite critical. I think the other piece is thinking about individual risk points or points of failure. So sometimes you get a person who is very unique and you building an operating cadence. Like we had someone who was designing games and innovation. And so you have this one person, but if I take this person out of the operating model, the entire operating model crumbles. And so again, that's fine up to a certain point, but typically when you're in your B or C series, the investors get more nervous about these singular points of failure. And so maybe I need to disrupt myself, make it a bit uncomfortable and say, hey, I'm still really valuing this person. I'm still creating room for them in the organization. But I'm also creating a few safeguards, so not a disproportionate amount of the value that I get an investor to underwrite is tied up in key person risk.
Oh, yeah. And so in the industries that you're specializing in, right, with advanced industries and automotive, is there any type of trend you're seeing or any type of evolution that's going on that gets you really excited about the future for those industries?
It's a good question. I think what gets me excited is that hopefully at some point we will have more progression on autonomy. I think it's been interesting because we've been very focused on electric vehicles. I think with some of the latest releases in the bill, it looks like we're going to roll back a bit on the subsidies. And so I think we're going to go to a bit more customer-driven powertrain mix as opposed to a regulatory forced powertrain mix. But between what Waymo is doing, what Tesla is doing, we're seeing a lot more traction around kind of autonomy and kind of autonomous vehicle. And so I think as a theme, I find that fascinating, and I think we're going to give people back an incredible amount of productivity while taking an asset that today 95% of the day sits in the parking lot and actually making it productive, which has a bunch of both economic benefits but also environmental benefits. I think I'm excited about the general digitization of the space. So whether that's hey, with tariffs now, a lot of our clients are rejiggling their supply chains, and they're thinking about tariff engineering and exception management and NCIS codes to be trade compliant. And so it's exciting to kind of see what can technology do to kind of create more agile supply chains that allow us to kind of pivot quicker. And then I think just the pace of all of these things happening. I think one of the things when you look at is when we adopted seat belts, it took like 40 years from like the introduction to a full mandate to like every new car needed to actually have seat belts. And now kind of we're talking about months and weeks on kind of somebody running an innovation engine in a business and then either by themselves or with a technology partner scaling it and experimenting with it. It's of course not a full-blown rollout, but just kind of the pace of change and the cadence of change is just much more rapid. I think what that though requires is a little bit of discipline to not run into every rabbit hole because it can become quite tempting, like, oh, my competitor is doing this and my competitor is doing this. And so I think having a bit this North Star and then saying, is whatever my competitors are doing or whatever new technology piece available to me, does it actually help me get there or get there faster? Or is it actually a distraction and I'm just doing it because I have the feeling everyone else is doing it? And I think today, whether it's podcasts, news, whatever form of social media, LinkedIn, you get the feeling people are constantly releasing new stuff every single day, but it's a little bit this amplification of the environment you're in. And so I think having the clarity and also testing with your team on, do we really need to run each of these experiments, or are there a few more big bets we want to do that truly propel us forward?
Oh yeah, and you speaking of testing these different things, right? So if we have early stage founders, if they've launched the business, if they're looking to scale it, is there in your experience any handful or like 3 questions or considerations that every business or that most businesses maybe forget to ask themselves at the beginning? Is there any missing piece that you find down the line that day one information would be so helpful? Like the first question a company should ask itself or the first consideration they really typically seem to overlook?
So, I mean, I don't think any of you guys are going to overlook this because you're in great kind of company and support by Silicon Slopes. But I mean, sometimes people get enamored with 1 or 2 customers and they don't think about what is the full addressable TAM. Yeah, like, is there actually enough customers who look like this customer I'm designing the solution for? I think the second one is kind of, do I want to actually scale and grow the business, or do I want to sell it? And there's nothing wrong with it. But when we sometimes see, and I joke about this because I see this in auto software all the time, people start these companies and their day one strategic plan is, in 2 years, I'm going to sell this to one of the 3 big auto software companies, and there's nothing wrong with it. But you're very much building a business to get 200 dealers on the platform. You're going to show there's a willingness to pay. And then you don't actually build the robust commercialization engine to sell this to 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 dealers. And that's totally fine, yeah? But I think sometimes people forget to say, what do I actually, and again, yes, sometimes you get a great offer and you still sell even though you were planning to run the business forever. But I think there is something about really setting up the business today with a ground rules and a kind of market model that allows this longer term kind of commercialization journey. And I think the last piece is it a product or is it a business? So sometimes people get very excited about like a very specific product that solves a specific problem, but a singular product doesn't necessarily create a through cycle resilient business. And so thinking about what is the business as opposed to one point solution.
Oh, that's so good. Does anybody have any real quick questions on that, given that that was specifically targeted at founders? And if not, we'll circle back on the Q&A. But that's so valuable. I think that obviously we need to be able to know our market, test our vision, but then also, to your point, have that North Star that you keep returning to and make sure that that North Star is aligned with the business itself. I have a personal question, which is just that as we've been talking about that, what is the impact that you're looking to shape in your life with your career?
Wow, that is a big question. So I've always been on the advisory side, and I just get really excited to make individual, whether it's founders, whether it's CEOs, to make them successful and to kind of unlock their visions. And I think sometimes it's like people are like, oh, those who can't do teach and those who don't know what to do with their career, they become consultants, and that's totally fair to an extent. But I think for me, it's like I truly get energy if I can help a CEO figuring out how to make their team more effective. If I can think a company around what does it really take to attract the right talent in Utah, if I can help a state to think about how can I lower poverty level and increase workforce access for some of the rural demographic in Utah. And so I think it's less about here's the one thing, because I think the one thing would be like one specific company with one specific leadership team, but I think it's continue to have this amplifying ability to help kind of companies kind of grow and develop and then make kind of courageous choices in the markets they're operating in.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. Your fingerprints are going to be on all of these different moves of
We'll
industry.
see.
Yes. Yes. Well, first, how are we doing on time so far? I think, we'll do a quick Q&A just to keep it lively. I have a mic that I can hand around. Scott will do it. All right. So who has a question for Inga real quick? All right, cool. We have a few. Let's go ahead and start right here.
Let's do it.
Please. Thank you. Go ahead and say your name for everyone and let us know maybe your industry.
Chris Young, entrepreneur. I'm a car guy. I drive a Tesla, so that's my perspective, but I grew up around Fords and muscle cars and all that. But you were talking about knowing the customer. It's very important to know the customer and test for that and so forth. But Steve Jobs was famous for saying, they don't know what they want. I don't need to do all that testing. They don't know what they want. They will know when I build it. And I know what they want. And then Tesla, I think, is a little bit in that vein too. People weren't aware of the potential of electric vehicles and so forth. And then Amazon comes on now with a Slate platform, which is modular and very minimalistic, addressing a new market. So all those things, and I don't think people knew. I'm not sure how he tested that. Probably people wanting to have something much less expensive and more utilitarian, but I'm not sure how much he tested on that or just figured out that there was a market. Are you aware of, do you have any reflections on those insights?
So, I think if you ask the customer, do you want me to build exactly that product? Or do you want me to build an iPhone and so you can get rid of your iPod and your banking, credit cards and everything? I think it's hard to get that. But I think if you think about kind of customer journeys and customer pain points, and so if you look a lot at Tesla's product development, or their development of a go-to-market channel, which was without dealers, which was unheard of at the time. It's like they went through every lawsuit under the sun to overcome US franchise laws, which are very, very dealer-friendly. And I think what they started with, again, is there's a customer pain point in the buying journey, which is I spend 4 hours at a dealer, and then I get dragged in this financing office, and then the finance guy tortures me, and then at the end I have a car, but I feel I got a shoddy deal. And so I think they said, I want to have so I think they started from what are the customer journeys, what are the customer pain points. They didn't ask the customer, do you want that product? And so I think I truly believe in that. I think the other thing is, they were very clear on what are the value pools that what they wanted to go after in terms of what was the opportunity between selling the EV credits, what is the opportunity between tapping into a buyer segment between the X, the Y, and the different products they have launched. And I think you would also say developing fully without the customer results into something like the Cybertruck, which maybe hasn't been as successful in the launch. And so I think there is, for me, it's, if you ask the customer, do you want this perfect product? They might tell you yes, but I have no willingness to pay for it. And so I think if you start with kind of journeys and pain points, you assign kind of value to those kind of pain points, and then you integrate that into your product development. And then, yes, you have to be a visionary. Like if it's just tweaks and modifications on an existing product, you're not going to tap into a whole new market. And I think the point on Amazon, on like a very modular piece, it really comes from the fact that the average car payment in the US today is $750, which is on a new car, which is unaffordable for most US consumers. Auto debt in subprime has a 6.6% like delinquency rate. And so if you look at all these metrics, you're like, we really need a car at like a $300 a month price point to really tap into the broader US consumer market. And so it comes from taking a look at where the market potential is, where the profit pools are, and then how do I have a product and a product solution that allows me to kind of access that space.
Brad Huber, tech entrepreneur, currently in the security industry, but I'm also a car guy, yeah. And you know, when I look at the automotive industry, it's pretty cool, but it's super competitive. There's a lot of technological disruption going on. There's a lot of capital required to start up or even to reinvest. If you're an incumbent, you need a lot of capital to do that. And so I'm just wondering, how do you stay competitive in the automotive industry? And then beyond that, what lessons might we take from that as entrepreneurs to other industries?
So yeah, I totally agree with you. Like auto is a bit of a cutthroat business. Yeah, and we were just looking at like the average auto supplier margin is 5%. The average OEM margin is 7 to 8%. The average margin for like dealer software companies is still kind of in like the high single, low double digits. So I think as an industry, I think when many people start companies, they want something which is 25 plus EBITDA margin. It's not the auto industry. I think what it focuses though is like it creates a real focus on value and kind of really thinking about, I mean, the reason auto supply chains are so complicated is because auto truly believes in relative competitive advantage, and if the relative competitive advantage is in China or India or Taiwan for components, I create a vehicle that gets pulled together with a very complex and diverse supply base. And so I think there is something about when you're starting a business to have this clarity on what do I do myself, what can I have a partner do, and what can I outsource, and do I really need to hire 15 people who do this for me, or can I actually partner with a vendor, be that a marketing agency, be that a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supplier. I think there's also a real learning around this notion on continuous improvement. Whenever I go into an industry outside of auto and they're like, oh, my year-over-year improvement is 1%, I'm like, that's kind of cute, but like most of my OEM clients want like 3, 4, 5%, and then in parallel to reducing the cost on my new product, I need to drive an innovation pipeline that allows adaptive cruise control, lane departure warning, all the ADAS features we now bring into a car, because if you look at cars over the last couple of decades, we have added more and more features and more technology to it. And while cars have gotten less affordable, they have actually not gotten less affordable commensurate with the amount of technology we've added into the product. But I think there is this notion on kind of what is the core and what pays the bills, and how do I make this as cost efficient as possible, and almost how do I run two different engines within my business. How do I run this lean, mean core business where my excellence is in execution, with how do I have an innovation pipeline, and how do I insulate the two of them a little bit from each other, and then kind of real clarity around what do you do yourself versus what do you have ecosystem partners do for you, because they're better positioned, lower cost, further along on the innovation journey on those aspects.
Great. Okay, one more question up front, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hey Inga, my name's Russ. Thank you so much for sharing today. I work in consulting as well on the leadership side with people to people. And you've spoken a lot towards AI today within industry. And I'm wondering, as a consultant yourself, how have you been leveraging AI to help you as a consultant in what you do to provide your service?
So it's definitely helped me because I can ask it every morning what happened in my email inbox in the last 12 hours and who should I actually respond to. So I think, I feel I've used it in 3 different ways. So I think just personal productivity. I like with all the leadership roles I have in the firm, the amount of emails I get, and so prioritizing this. I think so there's this personal productivity aspect. I think the second piece is I'm trying to really stay connected on what my clients do, and so between the news releases, the stock prices, the LinkedIn announcement of who has hired whom. So I think a lot of you guys engage with customers, and sometimes you're looking for what is the next reason for me to call my customer or call my channel partner. And so kind of having AI tell you in the morning, here's all the news releases around every company, here's the promotions in the company, and it might give you an in with somebody who you were hoping to try your product and haven't been successful with, but now this person moved and there's somebody new in the role, and so I can use the new role as a way to re-engage with them. And so kind of thinking about it both kind of from a network, but also from a go-to-market kind of aspect. And then I think the last thing is around thinking about what are the, I always think about what is the value creation thesis for my clients, and are there different building blocks that AI can bring to now take a different approach on value creation. So I would say those are maybe the 3 biggest areas.
Is that helpful? Yeah. I need to figure out how to get my inbox as handled. That's amazing. Can we please thank Inga for being here today? You are truly... I've now had multiple conversations with this woman, and she is an endless well of information and insights and brilliance. So we really thank you for being here today. I'm very excited to see McKinsey plant a flag in Utah and to see our Silicon Slopes community continue to gather and figure out ways to be just, learn, connect, and serving together, building out this ecosystem and thriving on a global stage. So thank you again. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe in the rain. And thanks again. We'll see you next Friday.
Thanks a lot.